just an overview, there's the Center for Applied Research, also known as CARS, part of our team members here. For those who have been around and want to welcome two members to our team, Ida Constance and Karina Joyner, who are on the call. Our Kaufman and Associates team, Holly, Josh, and Nicole. Nicole's one of our newer team members. That's one of the newer team members that's on the project. Just want to give her acknowledgement there. And so what we're going to cover today is we're going to have some brief announcements, speak briefly about outside delivery systems, and then unlocking proactive tribal partnerships with our guest speaker, MK Youngblood, who we'll introduce here in a second. Okay, so just some quick announcements. There has been several questions around if the standardized tools that were released by DHCS were going to be translated. So we did hear back from DHCS. They are in the process of having those tools translated. We do not know to what amount or frequency of languages that will be translated in, but we're assuming for sure that Spanish will be one of the first ones released. And as soon as that comes out, it will be an email blast will go out to the counties. Additionally, two new resources have been created to support the mobile crisis teams. The non-suicidal self-injurious behavior, an outline of that, and a CPR training resource have been created. And these two will be up on the MTAC website, hopefully by Friday. So if you want to check those out, you can definitely do so in that section. All right, so going over to one of our biggest challenges that we've seen across the state, both for those that have implemented and are ongoing to implement the benefit, is our recruiting mobile crisis team members. And so looking at SAMHSA and looking at what the counties across California, there's really some good practices that are coming out that are emerging, and really looking at how we can help establish this mobile crisis workforce. And one of the first things that we are seeing that's attracting or helping attract individuals to this profession, not only for behavioral health, but that want to work in mobile crisis responses, is thinking about the branding of what these mobile crisis teams can actually, like what allure does it have to them? What does it mean to be part of a mobile crisis team? What type of experience can you have? So when you were thinking of this, or you're thinking of the messaging around it, it's like, what can we do to attract job seekers to the field? And some of the biggest things that are takeaways that we've saw so far was emphasizing the mission and how it's actually helping someone who is in crisis. So some big takeaway here was emphasize what and how they contribute as an individual level to people who are in crisis, how their interventions impact the work that they do. And then a part of ongoing and creating and cultivating a workforce that's working towards having a mobile crisis team and wanting to be part of it, as we're really looking at continuing for us to cultivate networks to connect job seekers to employers. Like how quickly or how can we advance that for this? So some good ways or some messaging around that was to have clear and concise information about the opportunities that mobile crisis benefits, or that mobile crisis response can not only benefit them as they develop in their careers, but also how it can benefit society. So when you're doing that, it helps them understand potential. When I say them, I'm thinking of potential prospects that want to come into the team. It's really highlighting the skills that they can get, the training, the development and experience that they can gain, and how this they can leverage that experience into other career paths across their behavioral health career or whatever career they choose. One of the big things also is looking at how to streamline the application process and making it easy for people to navigate. We know that can be challenging at times, and there's a lot of different blasts. So the easier it is for someone to apply, the better opportunities that we could potentially have to get a good workforce in place. Really just want to highlight for team compositions, of the mobile crisis teams, that the use of clinicians is something that we've heard a lot of, but the really the behavioral health information notice, the BIN, expanded the amount of individuals that can actually provide this. So we really want to encourage counties and those to expand the teams to look at alcohol and other drug counselors, the peer support specialists, think of EMTs, the community health workers, paramedics, LVNs, or mental health rehabilitation specialists. All of these are approved providers that were through the BIN. And when we're thinking of the behavioral health workforce or who can do this service, we really are encouraging everyone to take a moment to see who else or how else you can bring people in to help deliver that type of service. So just a reminder there for everyone. And then when you're thinking of outside delivery systems, so having an outside delivery system can help support the mobile crisis teams on the delivery of 24/7 services. This, of course, can be often can be thought of as contracting with outside providers, such as a nonprofit agency. But developing MOUs with other emergency service providers, local agency, greatly enhance the crisis continuum of care. And that's really where we're going to spend the bulk of our time here this morning, and looking at how we can enhance that and how we can collaborate with tribes on mental health and health issues itself. So with us today, our guest speaker is MK Youngblood. MK Youngblood is the Chief Officer for California Tribal Emergency Response and Relief Agency. He has over 3 decades of experience as a first responder. Expertise lies in law enforcement and wildland fire management. Throughout his career, he has held various roles, including environmental health and safety manager and tribal historic preservation officer at the Halseythe Basin and Hokama Mono tribe, safety officer, tribal liaison and project manager for the Walbridge Fire environmental team leader and tribal liaison for the Creek Fire and Badger Fire, a safety officer for Slater Fire, Echo Mountain Complex Fire, and Lincoln Fire, a police officer at Robinson Rancheria, environmental development manager and reserve, a task force lead for Camp Fire, LUN Fire, and Napa Fire, a tribal administrator at Cold Springs Rancheria, a police lieutenant at Wichita. Hope I said that right. Youngblood, he can correct me. Indian Colony. Each position has gained him valuable insights and skills in emergency response. He has a bachelor's degrees in special major from CSU Fresno, and disaster archaeology, culture, and natural resources and safety with a minor in American Indian Studies. We welcome MK Youngblood today to give us some information around how to best navigate when working in those tribal spaces and how to create those types of MOUs. And he's going to give us a nice, wonderful roadmap. And I turn it over to you, Youngblood.
Thank you. So before I begin, I want to do a few things, give an acknowledgement of the land that I currently live on, which is Yokutch land here in the Central Valley, and a traditional greeting in our language, in our ways. So, Ninian Waso Yepe, Manahu Hili Hili Hiat, Ninian Waso Yepe, Ninian MK Youngblood, Haslett Basin Hokmo Mono Tuabi Atum. So a translation for that would be welcome, hello. My traditional name is Waso Yepe, and my English name is MK Youngblood, and I'm a member of the Haslett Basin Hokmo Mono Nation. And in Mono, we call ourselves Tuabi Atum, which means children of the mountain. So just wanted to give a proper greeting and set the stage. Next slide. Oh, there it is. Perfect. So yeah, we're going to talk about a roadmap. You know, the easiest thing, gotta love GPS and technology. Back in the day, you used to have to pull out paper books to do this and actually plot how you were going to travel. So we wanted to use that in today's narrative to discuss, you know, what is the best roadmap? How do we get from A to B to C to D? And understanding, you know, the history on how to collaborate with tribes on mental health or any health issue, You got to really go back to the history of the tribe and the history of the area before you can really do anything to move forward on that. Next. So for those of you that don't know, here's a little bit of history about the complex inner workings of what is now California in the United States through a tribal perspective. So we have the pre-contact era, which is anything generally before 1769. You know, California currently is home to over 100 federally recognized tribes, and probably close to that non-federally recognized as well. There are diverse indigenous groups within California, 8 major language groups that are spoken here, and the tribes currently and historically have practiced traditional forms of government, subsistence, and other cultural practices for eons. Then we run into 1769 to 1821. We talk about the Spanish colonization and Mexican rule. In 1769, Spanish started colonizing what is now Southern California with Gaspar de Portola and Father Junipero Serra. We've got the missions. If you're from California in 4th grade, you might be familiar with this project. But there is a dark side to that for tribes and for communities that have been near them and experienced that, with cultural suppression, disease outbreaks. Basically, it was slave labor. We lost the land, lost the resources, and lost autonomy. From 1846 to 1848, you've got the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. So Mexico gives up California in essence, and California becomes a state in 1850. And shortly thereafter, we've got the gold rush, and that just brings on state-sanctioned genocide. So after gold was discovered at Sutter's Mill, Native peoples statewide suffered widespread violence and displacement and genocide at the hands of the miners and settlers as they flooded into the tribal areas. The tribes were forced into other areas. There were treaties signed in this time period. However, none of the treaties were ratified through Congress. So in essence, there is no legal transfer of land title in California from the tribes, even though we don't look at it that way traditionally, ratified by Congress. We move into the reservation area from the 1850s to 1900s. A lot of our relatives were forced onto lands that were not their own or into other areas. The lands were shrunken considerably, loss of traditional tribal ways and hardship, cultural suppression. I was born in 1969, and in context, it was illegal under federal law until 1978 with the Native American Religious Freedom Act for us to actually have traditional ceremonies. So for the United States celebrating itself as freedom of religion, it did not apply to us until 1978. And then in the 1950s to the 70s is the termination and relocation era. A lot of tribes were displaced, pushed around, lands taken away, recognition withdrawn. It was a very disruptive time in our recent history. Next. So to kind of combat that, we've come up with this term, be proactive. So you've got to build on the historical context and follow this roadmap. Here's your roadmap from P to E. So for P, you need to provide opportunities for tribal employment. The tribes have what's called a TERO, a Tribal Employment Rights Ordinance. And typically, if you're working on or near their tribal lands, this will apply. But for capacity building, take the time to sit there and determine if the tribe has some qualified applicants that you could utilize. Not only will your diversity increase, but the breadth of knowledge will increase. I always say the trick to being the smartest person in the room is knowing you're not the smartest person in the room. Everybody has something to offer. Then R, you need to research your tribal localities and ancestral homelands. Figure out who's around you. In your counties where you are all at right now, could you name all the tribes? opportunity for future projects with the tribe. It may not just be this mental health issue. There may be another project that the tribe can assist on in different departments, whether that's natural resources, the roads department, construction. Reach out to the tribes and see what other opportunities you have to collaborate and partner up on. Advocate for tribal collaboration, which I'm very fortunate was done here. Thank you, Joshua, for the tribal collaboration, because sometimes we get pushed off to the side or just made into a checkbox where we reached out to the tribe, we're done. That's all we had to do. That is not active consultation. Laws have changed around that as well. It used to have to be passive, now it's active. But you really need to advocate for that tribal collaboration. We have a lot to offer. Consult early and often, and there are federal guidelines regarding this, depending on what business that you're dealing with. One of the big things is to be truthful in your words and actions. If you're going to do something, deliver on it. If you're not going to be able to deliver on it, preface it with, this is something we'd like to do. We're trying to see how to accomplish it, but it may not come through, because we remember everything. Just like, those of you that if you ever have any children and you mention McDonald's once, that's, you said we're going to McDonald's. So be truthful in your words and actions with what's going on. When you get any chance you get, incorporate traditional knowledge and practices, especially with mental health. We have the White Bison Society. There are traditional ceremonies that can be utilized, sweat lodge ceremonies and other traditional ceremonies. We have a bear dance ceremony. Those may be able to be incorporated into the mental health, into your wraparound services. Visit the tribes. Don't just sit there and make phone calls. Go out to them, see them, go to lunch. If they have a business, patronize the business, go over there. We have tribes here in the valley that have gas stations. Obviously, a lot of tribes have casinos, but they have a lot of other businesses. There may be mini marts. There are construction companies. There are tons of different tribal businesses that can be patronized throughout California when you visit the tribes. And just engagement on all levels. Any chance you get to actively engage with the tribe, do so, but do it in what we call in a good way. So we talked about contacting the tribe. Before you contact the tribe, you definitely want to do your research. There's a couple of places you can reach out to, and I put little screenshots on here. Bureau of Indian Affairs. You can actually search different tribes there. The Native American Heritage Commission down below. State and federal agencies will have contacts to tribes. Sometimes they're up to date, sometimes they're not. Academic institutions that are in conjunction with some of the tribes and doing different projects will have access to them and points of contact, and other online databases that you could research. Some of them through JSTOR or LexisNexis. There's a couple of different databases that you can search. Google obviously is one of the easiest that you can search, but do your research before contacting the tribe. And then how to contact them. We're going to talk about some best practices. Each tribe is different. Understand that. We'll talk about the sovereignty, but each tribe in essence is its own mini state. So before you contact the tribe for some of the best practices, do some research on the tribe's history, culture, and current activities. There are the Pomo tribes up in Lake County. There's a horrific history with Bloody Island and the massacre that occurred there. And if you're trying to interact with the tribe, you should know the history of what's happened in the county in context with what the tribe has suffered. Familiarize yourself with any protocols or preferred methods of communication. So some tribes may want in-person meetings. Some may want emails. You need to find out who you need to reach out to and in what manner. So typically you're going to reach out if they have a tribal liaison would be great, or an administrative staff reach out to them. Trying to reach out directly to tribal council is probably not going to be fruitful. And it takes time. I can tell you, I've reached out to tribal councils and it's taken up to 3 months because I've had to contact the tribal administrator's assistant, then get on schedule to speak to the administrator. The administrator takes it to council. Council talks about it if they even want to discuss anything with us. Then the administrator calls me back. And then if they do, then they set me up on calendar. It could be 60, 90, 120 days. So don't think that you can do this in a short period of time. You need to make sure you have enough time to accomplish the task. Check the tribe's website for guidance on who to approach. Will typically have email addresses or a little icon that says contact us. Clearly state your name and position and purpose of your contact, what you're doing and why you want to speak to them, and give them a brief overview of your organization or department to establish the context of the communication. Some more best practices: communicate your sincere interest in learning about the tribe and building a respectful relationship. This goes back to come in a good way. If you're trying to do what's right, it should show that. If you're earnest in your efforts, it should show that. It should not show that you're being sneaky or sly or trying to get something from the tribe. Too long our history, people have taken and don't give. So it needs to be reciprocal in what you're doing. Articulate the reason for your contact and any specific information or collaboration you're seeking. You may be asking for information that the tribe is not going to give up because of tribal intellectual property. But you need to explain to them why you're seeking that information and what you're going to be doing with that information. Be transparent about the goals of your organization and how you envision that collaboration. At this time, you're going to want to inquire about any specific protocols or cultural considerations when communicating with the tribe if you do get to have a meeting with tribal council. Recognize that the tribal reps may be busy and it may be a prolonged time to get in front of them. They may have, unfortunately, other higher priority issues that they're dealing with. So be flexible and willing to accommodate that, specifically the mode and pace of communication. Understand that some information may be sensitive or private, and respect the tribe's right to control the dissemination of such information. I'm currently working on a project with my tribe with Fresno State for a class in anthropology, and the information that we're gathering will be shared with the professor, who is a close friend of the tribe, but it will not be maintained in any of the university's databases. We will control the document, and we control who sees it and when they see it and why they see it. You need to clearly communicate your commitment to the confidentiality and data protection. That is huge. We've seen data breaches left and right. Every time we turn around, there's a data breach. If you receive a response, acknowledge it promptly and express gratitude. Follow up as needed. Keep those lines of communications open and demonstrate your commitment to collaboration. It shouldn't just be a one-off where they feel you've come to them for some information that you need for the immediate time, and you're just going to kind of cut them off and let them be after that and not need them. That's not the way to earn tribe's trust. And when appropriate, consider attending tribal events. A lot of tribes have powwows in the area or different showcases that you can go to. Go out there and demonstrate your commitment to the community and understanding them. So how do you move forward? So I'm going to set up some best practices on how to develop an MOU with the tribe. Number one, you have to understand that tribal sovereignty and cultural sensitivity. Tribes are sovereign. Federally recognized tribes are sovereign. Non-federally recognized tribes still view themselves as sovereign. However, there are some political issues that abound with that. There is Public Law 280 here in California, for those of you that are aware of it. It gives concurrent jurisdiction on criminal and civil issues. So it muddies the water on tribal sovereignty. However, that can actually be negated on a case-by-case basis by the tribe. And it's typically here on the West Coast. Nevada is not a PL 280 state. So the tribe has complete sovereignty over its lands and the people that come on it. Approach the development of the MOU with cultural sensitivity. Acknowledge the tribe's unique history, traditions, and values. Establish those clear objectives and expectations. You need to be upfront. This is what we're looking for. This is how we think we can help the tribe. This is how we feel the tribe can help us. That help should go both ways. Articulate the roles, responsibilities, and expectations of each party involved. Engage in, again, meaningful consultation and collaboration. Involve the leadership and relevant stakeholders from the tribe in the negotiation process. All too often, I have seen people get too focused with tribal chairs, and not that the tribal chairperson, or in our case, the head bear for my people, is not important. He is. However, the best way I can relate this is the worst person you can upset is the elder clan mothers, because while typically the tribal chairperson wields a lot of power, the clan mothers and the elders wield a lot of influence. So make sure that you're involving the relevant stakeholders. I can think back to a time in the United States. I believe it was the Oneida Nation, and they asked them to come and have a meeting, and they purposely excluded the women because, this is pre-1920s America, and women don't even have the right to vote. And they didn't realize that the decision makers were the women. They were the elder clan women of that tribe. And the men that they brought, because they felt they wanted to deal, on a man-to-man basis, couldn't make any decisions. They were just figureheads. So understand who the relevant stakeholders are. Seek input and feedback from the tribe throughout the development of the MOU. Make sure it's inclusive and a mutual understanding. Tailor it to the tribal needs and preferences. This is why you need to do your research on the tribe. There are no blank MOUs that you can just grab a template and use it for every tribe and in every situation. You need to customize it to align with the specific needs and priorities and preferences of the tribe as it relates to the issue that you're trying to collaborate on. Be flexible and open to adapting the terms of the MOU based upon the tribal input and feedback. It's a back and forth negotiation. Address any legal and regulatory considerations. Make sure it applies with all laws. Not only should it apply with all local, state, and federal, but there may be tribal laws that it needs to comply with. You need to understand that those need to be in compliance as well. Consider consulting legal experts with expertise in tribal law to review and provide guidance on the MOU. My cat is hungry in the background, if you can hear it. Establish mechanisms for communication and conflict resolution. Include provisions in there for regular communication and updates between the parties. You shouldn't just draft this document and then set it aside and say, well, we did it. There it is. It's that brick sitting over there. It's a living document that needs to be looked at and discussed on a regular basis to make sure there aren't any provisions that need to be updated. And have that procedure in writing for how you would resolve disputes. Clarify resource allocation and financial responsibilities. This is huge. Right now, the state of California, CalNAGRA, has made a mandate to all the Cal State universities to and I don't like to use repatriate because typically we're matrilineal societies. So rematriate our cultural items within 5 years, but they gave no funding source to do so. So keep that in mind. If you're going to have resource allocation, have the funding sources clearly identified and who's responsible for what. Specify how they're going to be allocated and managed. And try to include sustainability and evaluation measures. You need to incorporate provisions for monitoring, evaluating, and reviewing the effectiveness of the MOU. Again, you can't just write it and set it aside and say, there it is. Just like a safety document, it's a living document and it can be altered with both parties' agreement, but it can be altered at any time, providing the key indicators have been met on how that's to be done. Document it and formalize the agreement. Draft the MOU in clear, concise language. Avoid jargon or overly technical terms. And I hate to say it, coming out of law enforcement and emergency management, there are so many acronyms, and I share this. I had somebody say, oh, we need to get the employee the EAP. And I said, okay, are we talking about the employee assistance program, or are we talking about the emergency action plan? Even in wildfire, we've had meetings with other agencies out of state, at trainings, and the instructors will talk about even common language. If you're talking about a tanker for wildfire, in other states, a tanker refers to a 18-wheeler with 50,000 gallons on it. Well, when you call for a tanker in California, we want something with wings coming in. They're airplanes. That's a tanker we're referring to. So even common knowledge, common words, you need to make sure that you're understanding the definition that you're using for that. Ensure that all parties understand and agree to the terms before finalizing and signing the document. Because I can tell you all too often, we have done this as tribal people. Finalize documents, sign them, specifically treaties, and they don't get followed. Try to cultivate that long-term relationship and trust. Just with everything, it shouldn't be short-term. It should be long-term. You're looking lifetime, generations, really. Commit to fostering that open communication. And you can see common themes in here: collaboration, communication, ongoing engagement. So, by following some of these best practices, the county departments, you can develop some really good MOUs with the tribes that are respectful, collaborative, and mutually beneficial to all parties. Lay that foundation for a good partnership and current initiatives and future initiatives. And for those that haven't seen an MOU, I've attached some MOUs in here that are easily accessible and public knowledge off of the World Wide Web. So you can pull some of these up. Some of them are tribal training, as you see below with the DOJ. I try to include some tribal MOUs in there for some context. So, I'm not going to read this verbatim, but just understand when you're developing that MOU between any entity in a tribe, that is extremely significant. And it is something that the tribe does not take lightly, considering our tribal sovereignty and the way historically we've been treated. You're formalizing that agreement, but you're also formalizing the trust, respect, and cooperation between the two entities. And that is all I have for this.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that knowledge with us. And at this point, I just want to open it up if anyone has any questions for MK Youngblood around what he discussed today. I just want to let anyone can enter that in the chat, or you could take yourself off mute. I just want to give a few moments in space. I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and expertise there on how to start to navigate and really foster those relationships with tribal communities, and looking for that resource, or how we can use tribal communities for the resource. I have a question though for you. Understanding, and so pardon if I'm wrong about any of this. From my understanding, a lot of Native Americans still live in metropolitan type of areas as well. Is there any coordinated groups or any way to start to navigate that in like more of our metropolitan type areas, or how any tips and tricks around there? Or essentially tips.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. I think there's a book written, the title something like "Not All Indians Live in Teepees." Like I said, I have a house in Fresno. I was not born on our tribal lands. I was born on a naval base. My father was in the military, and so a lot of tribes, very few tribal members actually live on the reservation or rancherias. So some of the bigger Indian groups, I know the Bay Area has a large Indian community. I don't know the name of it per se, but you can reach out to the greater Indian communities in the Bay Area. Some of the local ones, if you really want to get in contact with Indian communities or Native communities, you can reach out to like the Fresno American Indian Health Project or Bakersfield American Indian Health Project. I believe there are probably quite a few American Indian Health Projects throughout California. Those are two that I've dealt with and spoken to and know people that work there. Those are great resources because a lot of the tribes go to them. We call it Turtle Lodge, but it's a Sierra Tribal Consortium here in Fresno, and it has the federally recognized tribes involved and non-federally recognized tribes as well. So reaching out to some of those points of contact are really good because that gives you a better feel of the of the metropolitan Indian, the native. And I use some of the terms. Some of them are problematic. I mean, academic purposes, it's indigenous. The way I was taught, and again, this is just the way I was taught. We don't like to use the word Native Californian or Native American because it can be interpreted as anybody born in the Americas is a Native American. So when we speak, I'll normally ask them when I meet somebody, and I'm just gonna, like with Josh, I'll ask who are your peoples? Who are your people? And then Josh would reply with who his people are. So number one, it gives a context of that we recognize that you're part of the indigenous community, but we stay away from some of the general terms like that with Native and American Indian and just go with the tribal names. Haslett Basin Ho'okamomono is how we refer to ourselves, or you'll hear the Mono people or the Yokutch people, the Miwok people, Chumash. But it all depends on who you talk with. I just wanted to put that out there about some of the terms could be problematic. But again, if you run into that, apologize and tell them that you meant no offense, and ask them, just like with people's preferred names, what would you like to be called? It goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Josh, for dropping. He said, California Consortium of Urban Indian Health. Josh, can you speak to that really quick, or what that actually entails?
Yeah, so because of the large population of urban Indian in California, the Consortium of Urban Indian Health, there's several urban Indian centers throughout the state. And so Sakui is the name of that group, and amazing people. That relationship is vital. And Sakui is a indigenous run, tribally led organization that connects resources and health programs throughout the state. So really good point and group of folk if you are interested and want to connect in a good way. And really a lot of this is relationally based and driven. So all participants have no excuse now. Youngblood, you now know a California a Mono person who is well experienced and has expertise in these areas. So no excuses. He's here, Youngblood. So connect with him, connect with us, Kaufman. We're happy to help. And really just remember the importance of relationship here. So.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you both. Any other questions, or opening it up now to anyone for any questions they may have? That was really what we wanted to spotlight, and thank you both. Thank you, Ma'am Kaylee Youngblood, for sharing your knowledge. Want to open it up to everyone to see if they have any general questions. I don't see anything in the chat. Well, thank you all. Just really quick, the frequently asked questions and billing doc from DHCS is still being prepared. We do not know. Danielle, do you know when that's going to be finalized and when we expect that? No, she's shaking her head. I know we've been going back and forth because there was a lot of questions that we've gotten throughout the counties about that. Do you know that DHCS has been reviewing that? I'll turn it over to Danielle if she has anything to add.
Yeah, the FAQ doc was released already. We shared it a few times. Maybe we could put in the chat again the link to that. That does answer some billing questions, but they are continuing to gather responses for a lot of the additional billing questions that were asked during the billing office hours we had a few months ago. So it's a work in progress.
Again, thank you everyone for your time today. Really appreciate it. Good seeing some familiar faces. Thank you, MK Youngblood. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, team. If there is nothing else, just hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.